Let's talk more about that new AP NORC poll that finds President Trump's approval rating at an all-time low. As we told you a minute ago, it shows 33% of Americans approve of Trump's job performance, down from 38% last month. When broken down by party, 31% of Republicans, as John just mentioned, now disapprove of President Trump's job performance. That's a big number considering where he's been historically. And as the Iran war drives up fuel and energy prices, the poll shows Trump losing support when it comes to his handling of the economy specifically. That approval on the issue has fallen to 30%, down 8 points from last month. On the war itself, 32% approve of his handling of the conflict with Iran, down 3 points from last month versus 67% who disapprove. So, David Drucker, a lot to sift through there. I think when people responding to the poll say they disapprove of the war in Iran, they do perhaps approve of the military action. But I think what they're really saying is we also don't like gas at $4 a gallon as a result of the war we don't understand.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's not just, filling your gas up it's not just filling your car up at the pump. Willie, airline tickets have skyrocketed, right? The cost of fertilizer is up. The cost to ship goods is up. And so what has this done to the number one problem voters wanted the government to deal with? Inflation, the high cost of living. It's exacerbated all of it. So to the extent the administration could make a case that military action in Iran has made us safer and has reduced the threat, and here are the benefits right now, voters aren't seeing a benefit. I was on the Hill yesterday talking to Republicans about, how they feel about the president and the political atmosphere. And you're not going to see them complaining too loudly about the president, but quietly, everybody is aware of the political quagmire that this conflict has put them in, acknowledging that they weren't really in a great place to begin with. And that's, I think, being reflected in every poll that we see. And I think part of the problem, as a matter of politics that Republicans are having now is that even though we're in the midst of an extended ceasefire in Iran, apparently, the idea that the war is concluded is something that it hasn't taken hold of voters because it isn't over, right? It's like Groundhog Day in a sense from a political standpoint. And so every time the president extends this but doesn't reach a resolution, it becomes a sort of, political morass for Republicans. And that's just something that they don't really have control over or have a way out of themselves.
Yeah, I talked about this before. I went to an event for my son last weekend and was asked, is the Strait open? Is the Strait closed? What is it right now? And again, not from somebody that doesn't really follow politics an awful lot. And they're just kind of like, what's going on here? This is absolute chaos. We're paying over $4 a gallon. When's this going to end? And the president has said repeatedly it's going to end, but he knows he can't have it end until there's a deal on the Strait and until there's a deal on nuclear. But really, you look at those numbers, they're extraordinarily low. You look at the Republican numbers, they're sitting up at disapproval in the 30s. There's going to be polls that are going to have different numbers. But you've got to believe after some time that when you have Megyn Kelly, who has a huge following, when you have Tucker, a huge following, when you have them every day being critical of this war, being critical, Marjorie Taylor Greene being critical on the Epstein files, you have costs continuing to rise. That is going to add up after some time, and Tucker Carlson will Alex, if we can get a clip, Tucker had a remarkable conversation with his brother Buckley yesterday where he apologized for ever supporting the president and said he made a terrible mistake and he was genuinely sorry for it and he'd feel remorseful about it for the rest of his life. That resonates with voters who have followed Tucker Carlson for a very long time, who followed Megyn Kelly for a very long time. And these are not weak, woke, left-wing socialists. These are very people who endorsed the president the strongest a year and a half ago. And that does at some point start to have a real impact. And I do want to just circle back really quickly. We have Iran But what was everybody talking about before Iran? The Epstein files. And here you had an entire movement based on sexual predators and them making up sexual predators in Hollywood, or making up sexual predators with Pizzagate, or but this was a massive driver. They went out to see movies about guys who were supposedly, would brandish AR-15s and go to South America and go after child predators. Ended up that the person that story was based on had some questions asked of him. But they were going to get in and clean this up. And even on the Epstein files, it's one cover-up after another after another cover-up after another cover-up. And when you have Joe Rogan talking about that, when you have all of these other people talking about that who were all in for Donald Trump, at some point that is going to start to show up in the polls. And I think that's what we're starting to see now.
Yeah, there's been no resolution on the Epstein files. Pam Bondi, the now departed Attorney General, did not get to the bottom of it, did not release all the files as she promised. President Trump's name, of course, all over the Epstein files. And so perhaps this offered some kind of a distraction. Historians will analyze that for a long time, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, you have some of those leading voices in the conservative movement, podcasters, people on cable news channels, who have really, I mean, there's always been criticism, and then they kind of pull back and fall back in line. But some of the criticism we've heard in the last couple of days sounds like a breakup. We'll see if it holds, if Donald Trump makes a phone call and there's a makeup, which does happen. But this war in particular feels to many like a betrayal of the America First agenda that Donald Trump, and the no new wars agenda that he campaigned on and promised his supporters. And you're seeing some of that erosion in that poll.